What's up, everybody? Today is December 6th of 2020. My name is Derek, owner-operator of Gematrinator.com. And in this edition of the Super Stream today, we're going to talk about one of the bigger stories from this past week. Primarily the story about Elliot Page, who used to be known as Ellen Page, coming out as trans. And throughout the course of this video, we'll be talking about not only that news story, but also the one from Caitlyn Jenner, which started back in 2015, April 24th to be specific. We're also going to explain how these news stories are connected to major national monuments around the United States, particularly New York City. And we're going to explain this agenda by the numbers. And not only are we going to look at the dates of these stories and these monuments, as I mentioned, but also a couple of major Hollywood films. And one specifically that came to mind was Mrs. Doubtfire, which featured Robin Williams. And in this video, we'll talk about how the death of Robin Williams is also related to the numerology of this agenda, this 2-to-1 agenda, bringing two genders to one. So on the left side of your screen, you'll see my blog post. This is the first one I made after Ellen Page became Elliot Page. And I assure you, there's a lot more to it than just this news story. This appears like, just another story about the transgender movement. But this is something that's been planned by the media for a very long time. So we'll explore the riddle underneath here. And we start with the date that all of this became news. December 1st of 2020. This is a date that has what we call primary numerology of 53, 12 plus 1 plus 20 plus 20. In the alphabetic order, the word gender equals 53. And in reduction, transgender equals 53. Transgender also with matching gematria with December 1st and trans through the prime number connection. Aside from the date numerology, the date itself is also significant. December 1st, written 12/1. On 12/1, we found out about Ellen becoming Elliot. Ellen Elliot sums to 121. And when he came out, the quote was, "I am trans." This is the quoted phrase that was put all over the media headlines. "I am trans" equals 121 in reverse. Now, the rest of this post talks about a 666 riddle and also the film E.T. I'm not going to get into that now. We'll look at that a little bit later. But before we do, I want to explain how this is connected to the 9/11 attacks from back in 2001. And as we've been teaching for a couple of years, the 9/11 attacks had a strong theme of destroying the divine feminine. And we'll expand more on this part of the riddle in a little bit, but I want you to think about the year 2001 when the 9/11 attacks occurred. Think about the two twin towers being destroyed, ultimately being replaced by one. Of course, now at the site of the World Trade Center, there's only one tower, WTC-1. And this 2-to-1 numerology is a huge part of this. In Latin or Jewish gematria, the phrase divine feminine sums to 911. And think about how we had two towers standing on that spot. One tower, the North Tower, represented the male, as this had the 110-meter antenna on top of the 110-story building. The South Tower, without the antenna, was considered the female tower. And this was a division of gender energies. Think about how the word division also sums to 911 in that same cipher. Now, the two towers were destroyed in a Tisha B'Av ritual. Tisha B'Av sums to 9/11 in Jewish gematria as well. Tisha B'Av, of course, the Jewish holiday of remembrance, where the destruction of the two towers is observed. Now, Tisha B'Av remembers the destruction of Solomon's Temple. Solomon's Temple equals 185. And in 2001, we had the destruction of the World Trade Center, which equals 185. Elliot Page announced that he was a trans a span of 9 months and 11 days after his 33rd birthday. And that's interesting because World Trade Center construction began in 1968, which means that the Twin Towers were 33 years old when they were destroyed. Elliot Page coming out as trans, 33 years, 9 months, 11 days old. You'll notice that his original name, Ellen Grace Philpotts Page, has matching gematria with New York and New York, New York. Her age, or his age, Lord knows I'm going to make that mistake a lot during this video. He was 14 years and 203 days old on the date of the 9/11 attacks. That ties to the Hebrew gematria of Solomon's Temple, which is also known as the First Temple. Also check out how this story was exactly 1,003 weeks after the destruction of the World Trade Center. WTC equals 1003 in Jewish gematria. And think about how the word male equals 13. This was a tribute to Solomon's Temple. Solomon is 103, so does androgyne. So let's talk a little bit more about this connection to these New York monuments. Now, the World Trade Center sits right within line of sight of the Statue of Liberty. Now, growing up in school, I, and many of you, I'm sure, were taught that this is Lady Liberty, which stands upon Liberty Island. However, the face of Liberty lacks any features that appear feminine. And there's a lot of sources you can look up questioning the sexuality or gender of the Statue of Liberty. Some people think it's the Phrygian sun god Attis, which is a male. And what I talk about in this post is how right now we're undergoing a massive agenda right here in the United States. Of course, this is all being propelled by the coronavirus, COVID-19. And the agenda, ultimately, from the dark occult, is depopulation through a wide variety of means. And I want to draw your attention to an article that came out several months ago. And I don't know how they knew this as early as June, but it wouldn't surprise me if this is definitely the case. What they're saying is that here in 2021, next year, there should be about 500,000 fewer births than there were the past year. And, of course, this makes sense. People aren't going out. People aren't meeting each other. Even bars are closing at like 10 o'clock now. When do you think most people are hooking up at bars? It's usually closer to bar close after midnight. So it's not just that, maybe a virus has been introduced which is killing people. And, of course, 2020 has been really no worse for death and disease than any other previous year. And it's not that they're going to be killing mass amounts of people. Of course, they might do that. But really, this is about slowing down procreation. So when we look at this agenda of the transgender movement, and again, this is not a knock on any of the people who are part of it. Most of these people are being used, knowingly or unknowingly. But really, what they're doing is blurring the lines between genders. And by calling masculinity toxic and constantly changing the definition of what's beautiful, what they're doing is removing some of the elements that make humans the most passionate in life. And when humans are devoid of passion, they find themselves devoid of anything worth defending. And that is the New World Order MO. Destroy the family, destroy relationships, make it so people have nothing to stand up for and defend. Because if we do stand up and defend, then we win, because there's so many more of us than them. And they know that, and that's why they resort to spellcasting tactics, like we see with Gematria, the mainstream media, MK Ultra mind control. So the Statue of Liberty is something that is very representative of these efforts to the dark occult. And as I say here, it's no coincidence that the Statue of Liberty can see the World Trade Center for this massive gender transformation agenda. So now I want to tie this into the numerology of the Caitlyn Jenner story. Of course, Caitlyn Jenner, born Bruce Jenner, an Olympic gold medal winning decathlete. Now the name Jenner is very similar to the word gender, and that's not a coincidence either. This is how these things are pushed into the public consciousness. And how funny is it that when you add the gematria of Jenner and gender, not only do you get 119 in the alphabetic order, but you also get this 911 in Jewish gematria. Now, Caitlyn Jenner's life has been chronicled in depth by a TV show called Keeping Up with the Kardashians. And if you measure from the debut of this television series to the date that Jenner announced he was a trans, was a span of 90 months and 11 days. Again, with that 9/11. Remember Elliot Page, 9 months and 11 days after his birthday, when he made his announcement. All attributing this massive 9/11 gender transformation ritual. By the way, when we're talking about population control, it's of course paramount to mention the Georgia Guidestones. This agenda is not a secret. They literally wrote it on stone and put it out in the middle of nowhere for everyone to see. Right now, there's about 7 billion people in the world. The rulers of this planet want 6.5 billion less. And they're not shy about telling us. All right, so we're talking about the Statue of Liberty and how this all ties together. Well, there's more to this 9/11 part of it. And when we talk about 9/11, we're also talking about a very significant prime number. 911 is the 156th prime number. 156 is what I consider to be the ultimate eclipse number. And that's because an eclipse occurs every 1, 5, or 6 lunar phases. And in the year 2001, we had a total solar eclipse on the summer solstice. Now, on the first day of the 156th month after 9/11, actor Robin Williams died. And in the alphabetic order, the name Robin Williams equals 156. One of Robin Williams' most famous films was Mrs. Doubtfire, where he played a character named Daniel Hillard, who was a man but dressed up as a woman so he could visit and meet with his children. Now, just to show how Robin Williams is definitely connected to this story about Elliot Page, Elliot Page came out 7,021 days after 9/11. Robin Williams was born on 7/21. All right, so now we're going to look at the numerology of these monuments. So what we'll see here is that Caitlyn Jenner is heavily connected to the Statue of Liberty, this androgynous statue in the Upper Bay of New York. And then we're also going to get into a riddle behind the St. Louis Arch. The St. Louis Arch, which was constructed with Freemasonic symbolism, as we will cover, was so numerically connected to Elliot Page coming out, it's actually out of control. And we're going to explain how this has a lot to do with the year 2021 and the 2 eclipses that will occur in 2021. All right, so let's talk about the Statue of Liberty. And there's only one date that we're going to focus on when it comes to the statue, and it's really the only date that we're given here. That was the original dedication date of October 28th, 1886. There are a couple of other dates regarding when it became a national monument, but really this dedication is what's so important. Now, October 28th is a date that's connected to the number 666. And we see this in the birthday of Bill Gates. Bill Gates was born on October 28th. Also, the St. Louis Gateway Arch was completed on October 28th. Now, the reason October 28th is an interesting date is because if you go from January 1st of the previous year and then add 666 days, you get to October 28th. Now, the 666th prime number is 4,973. Okay. So 4,973. This is the 666th prime number. And we know that Bruce Jenner is connected to 666 not just through this October 28th birthday, but look what happens when you measure from 9/11/2001 to the date of his 2020 interview where he announced he was trans. 4,973 days. Again, the 666th prime number. So Bruce Jenner was born exactly 63 years after the dedication. Oops. As you can see here, exactly 63 years after the dedication of the Statue of Liberty. In reduction gematria, Statue of Liberty equals 63. In the reverse alphabetic order, trans equals 63. With the S exception, androgynous, 63, so does gender union, 63. Jenner's groundbreaking 2020 interview, 4 plus 24 plus 20 plus 15 is 63. The Statue of Liberty became a U.S. national monument on October 15th of 1924, measuring to the Jenner interview on 2020, 33,063 days. Now, Bruce Jenner has a 63. Well, let's just show you here. From the birthday of Elliot Page, February 21st of 87, to the birthday of Bruce Jenner, you get another 63, 630 days. And on the date of that interview, Page was 63 days after his birthday. Page currently plays the character Vanya Hargreaves on the Umbrella Academy. Check out how Vanya equals 63. And the number 63 has matching gematria with transgender. So this is a 63 overload right here. And think about how the phrase gender union equals 63 in reduction and 630 in English extended. Normally, I wouldn't gematrinate an arbitrary phrase like this, but I can't help but wonder if it's significant. Another reason I think this gender union gematria is important, and how interesting is it today that, it's December 6th, 12/6 today. This 480 in Jewish gematria also is interesting because if you measure from the 9/11 attacks when the two genders were destroyed, and then measure to the opening of World Trade Center 1, which represents the one male phallic tower, you get 4,800 days, almost exactly, and the date of the new World Trade Center opening had numerology of 48, just like gender union. So we looked at 630, the gematria of gender union. Well, check out the Gateway Arch. In St. Louis, Missouri, the Gateway Arch was inaugurated in the year 67. And check out the size of the arch, 630 feet high. But not only that, it's also 630 feet wide, 630 by 630. So we'll explain a little bit more about this numerology of the arch in a minute. Before we do, I want to talk about the significance of this number 221. So as I pointed out, Bruce Jenner, or Caitlyn Jenner now, born exactly 63 years after the dedication of the Statue of Liberty. Statue of Liberty 63, trans 63. Well, check out what happens when you write out 63 years. you get this really interesting value of 221. Think about how this number relates to the agenda, merging two genders to one. 2 to 1, like 2 to 1. Elliot Page was born on February 21st, the date written 2 to 1. The Statue of Liberty, the full name of the Statue of Liberty, is 221 or 212. The other way you can write February 21st. And if you measure from April 24th, the date of the Jenner interview, to December 1st, the date Elliot Page came out as trans, you find it's 221 days apart. On top of that, Elliot Page's announcement was 2,221 days after World Trade Center 1 opened. Let's just confirm this date for you. 1 WTC opening its doors to the public on November 3rd, 2014. Also consider how in the film Mrs. Doubtfire, the crossdresser that Robin Williams plays is named Daniel Hillard, and his name equals 221, 2 to 1. The word androgyny, if I can spell it, is 2 to 1 in reverse. This movie, of course, takes place in San Francisco, which is 122. But check out how the gematria of Mrs. Doubtfire, 150, 60, and 174 syncs up almost perfectly with the name Caitlyn Jenner. 150, 60, and 201. I'm sorry, 75. That's where the match. So you get 3 matches out of 4. Now, the Caitlyn Jenner interview on 2020 is connected to both the death of Robin Williams and the opening of the World Trade Center. Measuring from the Jenner interview to the death of Robin Williams is a span of 257 days. And that's interesting because the interview was also exactly 257 months after the release of Mrs. Doubtfire. Elliot Page's announcement, meanwhile, was exactly 257 sidereal months after 9/11. Remember, the phrase blood sacrifice equals 257. Now, if you measure from Robin Williams' death to the opening of the World Trade Center, you get 84 days. The World Trade Center also opened 105 days after Robin Williams' birthday. And these numbers are found in the gematria of Caitlyn, 84 and 105. There's some more connections in this post that I'm going to look at, but before I do, I want to finish off the riddle with the St. Louis Gateway Arch. Now, before we get into the transgender part of it, I want to explain more about the numerology of the construction of the arch, which is, of course, connected to the Masonic eclipse code. And yes, I get a lot of grief for always talking about eclipses, but that's because eclipses are almost always super significant, and my research continues to prove this over and over again. Now, again, we're talking about this number 221, representing gender transformation, 2 genders to 1, 2 to 1. In the year 2021, there are 2 solar eclipses. Once again, there are no partial eclipses. There's only an annular eclipse and 1 total eclipse. Now, these 2 eclipses in 2021 have very unique properties. The first one, an annular eclipse, starts in northern Canada and then actually circles around the North Pole and moves back to the west. The second eclipse of 2021 is in December. It's a total eclipse, and it does virtually the same thing, but instead it's at the South Pole. Now, normally, solar eclipses travel from west to east. And we saw this in the 2017 total solar eclipse in America, which started in Oregon and ended in South Carolina. This will happen again in 2024. Eclipse starts in Texas, ends in Maine. That's because the moon's orbit is faster than the rotation of the Earth. So these eclipses go from west to east. And in fact, if you look up any set of random eclipses, and let's just do this real quickly just to demonstrate that this is not common, right? We're going to find any random total or annular eclipse and look at the path, and we'll see it's a west to east path. So, again, these are just random eclipses I'm looking at here, and I can just about almost assure you they're all going west to east. They all have this path because that's what they do. So what I'm demonstrating here is that these eclipses, which move around the north or south pole, are really rare. However, in 2021, we get 2 of them. So this eclipse, instead of moving west to east, it actually goes east to west. Shout out to 7711, I believe, who also made this observation recently. So the path starts moving west, but then because it's so far north, because the North Pole is pointing towards the sun during this eclipse, by the time the eclipse ends, it goes east to west. This second eclipse has the same property. It starts out going west, but because the South Pole will be pointed towards the sun on the date of this eclipse, by the end of it, the sun will be moving, or the path will be moving, east to west. Why is this so interesting? Well, not only are the paths of these 2 eclipses similar to the St. Louis Arch, but the Gateway Arch was constructed to celebrate east to west expansion. So think about that for a second and how amazing that is. But this goes even further. Check out the date that this arch was inaugurated. June 10th of 1967. Well, that's interesting because in the year 2021, the first eclipse is on June 10th. That means the St. Louis Arch was inaugurated exactly 54 years before the first eclipse. 54? The word sun equals 54. The word arches equals 54. The phrase sun arches equals 54. In fact, Gateway Arch equals 112, just like east-west 112. So what you could say here is that the exoteric symbolism of the St. Louis Arch is that it's celebrating east to west expansion in the United States. However, the esoteric meaning of this St. Louis Arch is celebrating the unique paths of east to west eclipses. Pretty amazing, huh? Now, the St. Louis Arch, we're talking about the inauguration date. That was in the year 67. In reduction, St. Louis, Missouri equals 67. So does total solar eclipse. St. Louis, 74. Total solar eclipse, 704. But there's even more numerology here, and now we're going to connect this to Freemasonry. Now, in Freemasonry, one of the primary pieces of symbolism is the Royal Arch. Now, isn't it interesting that at the top of this arch is the number 69, which is the astrological symbol for Cancer. Cancer, of course, ruled by the moon. Cancer gives way to Leo, which is ruled by the sun. In the standard alphabetic order, the word eclipse equals 69, just like the number at the top of the arch. The Gateway Arch was inaugurated one day after 6/9. But what's more interesting about the date is that if you measure from its inauguration to the first day of the year 69, you get 571 days, the 105th prime number. Now that stands out because masonry equals 105. So masonry constructing an arch relative to the numerology of masonry. How perfect. Also, June 10th, the date of inauguration of the arch, was the 161st day of the year. There's a branch of Freemasonry called the Holy Royal Arch. Holy Royal Arch equals 161. So, taking a step back to this eclipse code, as I always say, the perfect eclipse number is 1331. Our entire Jewish Gematria code is built around this, even English Gematria to an extent. And in trigonal Gematria, the gateway arch equals 1331. Gateway arch on its own equals 1506. Remember, eclipses always occurring 1, 5, or 6 lunar phases apart, eclipse 156 in Hebrew. Now, both of these numbers, 1331 and 156, are connected to the number 666. Of course, 1331 is 666 times 2, minus 1. And 666 has matching gematria with plane of the sun, eclipse the sun, summing to 156. The Earth's polar axis is tilted 66.6 degrees from the plane to the sun. Now, the moon is an average of 238,000 miles away from the Earth, on average. You can look this up yourself. 666 equals 2,038. This arch resides in the city of St. Louis, Missouri, which equals 238. Okay, so both of these arch eclipses occur in the year 2021. And as we've been discussing this whole video, 221 is a big part of this agenda. 2 genders to 1, 221, like Elliot Page's birthday. So we talked about how her announcement was 221 days after the anniversary of genders, or Jenners. But there's a lot more that connects her to the arch, or him to the arch. Good grief. Check out how the word arch equals 102. This is the same gematria as Elliot Page in the alphabetic order. Again, the only digits that matter here are 1 and 2. The 0 is ignored. Now, if you measure from the date that arch construction began, look at this, February 12th, 212, right? To the date of Page's announcement, which was on 12/1. So from 212 to 121 is 21,112 days. Also, Gateway Arch, 112. Now, the Gateway Arch was completed on a date with numerology of 122. And then Elliot Page was born 1,112 weeks and 2 days later. As I mentioned, Elliot Page and Arch both sum to 102. This brings us back to the inauguration date, June 10th, 1987, which has, 1967, which has primary numerology of 102. Also notice the 39. The phrase in utero equals 102 and 39. And why would I talk about the phrase in utero in relation to the arch? Well, check out Gateway Arch National Park, where the arch sits. This park is laid out almost identically to a diagram of the female uterus. Of course, it's the female uterus. It's not the male uterus, but you know what I'm saying. If you lay this image directly over the park, it's almost identical. And this, again, remember, this arch created as a ritual for the 2021 eclipses. And the number 221 represents gender transformation. Hence why this park has a nod to something related to genders. And I don't understand this riddle 100%, but this is very interesting. Also, the date of inauguration, 10/6. It's also like the number 16. Now, the arch was finished on Bruce Jenner's 16th birthday. Check out how Bruce Jenner has primary numerology of 106. Bruce Jenner equals 1060. Now, the 16th prime number is 53. That's the value of womb, gender, transgender, Vesica Piscis, solar eclipse. So it all ties in nicely. But another primary part of the gateway arch that I want to look at is again relating to the measurements. Now, we talked about 630 feet tall, 630 feet wide. Now, what I forgot to mention earlier is that when construction began in the year 63, look how old Robin Williams was. He was 603 weeks old. And then Robin Williams died on August 11th of 2014, which falls a span of 63 days after the arch was inaugurated. All right. But this 630 feet, this translates to 192 meters. This 192 is also a really significant number to the eclipse code. So we've been talking about the number 156, right? Eclipse, gateway arch, 1, 5, or 6 lunar phases. Well, if you look at 156 weeks on a calendar, exactly. Notice how exactly 156 weeks is also 1,092 days. Well, the word eclipse equals 192. A number coded into the size of the arch. Ellen Page became Elliot Page a span of 192 days before the first arch eclipse in 2021. And again, his birthday, 2/21. Pretty cool stuff if you ask me. At least figuring this out is cool. What's not cool is that they're attempting to steer our minds in relation to what we think about gender. And of course, most of us who are watching this video, I'm 35. A lot of you are probably as old or at least nearing my age. It's not our minds that they're after. They're after the kids. And think about how confusing this has to be for kids. I mean, it's confusing for me. And no doubt, this confusion is going to lead to censorship, especially for those asking questions. But just think about this, right? We have one person here, born as a man, who then came out and said he was a woman, then had a sex change operation to present themselves as a woman, and is now going by a woman's name, okay? And that's fine and well, I guess. If you're going to present yourself as a woman, then having a woman's name makes sense. And transgender, gender dysphoria, these are real things. These happen. They're not that common. If you look at the media, you'd think they're everywhere, and in Hollywood they probably are, but all right, my point here is that you look at Elliot Page, and now what? Now we have a person who has presented themselves as a female this whole time, has always gone by a female name, did not have an operation, but now we're supposed to call this person presented as a female by a male's name. That's where things get really confusing. I mean, unless this person is now going to cut their hair and start looking and acting like a man, then I would get it, but when we have people presenting themselves as women who are using man's names, that's where a line has to be drawn. This is too strange. And it sucks because it feels like these people are being used for this agenda. And, what I'm saying could be used as hate speech in the near future. We know where this is going. It's just weird what's happening. And again, I try to keep my opinions out of things for the most part, but We all see what's going on. Before I get into the next part of this video, I want to talk about something that happened this week. I was on Crowdsource the Truth with Jason Goodman sharing Gematria. And, of course, there was a little drama that goes with that because someone in the community always needs drama to be following him around wherever he goes. So I do want to address that a little bit. But before I do, let's just finish off the numerology of this story. So Bruce Jenner born 63 years after the Statue of Liberty's dedication. Now, what's also interesting about that fact is that this translates to 102 years and 90 days on Venus. And of course, Venus is the planet that's most closely equated with femininity in astrology. On the date of that interview, Elliot Page was exactly 10,290 days old, matching the Statue of Liberty's Venusian age exactly at Jenner's birth. Elliot Page also has primary birth numerology of 129, and he came out as a trans 1 year and 290 days after the debut of the Umbrella Academy, where he plays Vanya Hargreaves. Notice how the name Ellen Page is 129 with capital letters. So Elliot Page's announcement was on the first day of December. And December, this used to be the 10th month. Dec, right? That's where we get dec from. You know, decade is 10 years. And think about how Bruce Jenner was a decathlete, right? Well, one day after Elliot Page came out as a trans, we had the death of another gold medal winning decathlete. Rafer Johnson died on December 2nd. And check out how Rafer Johnson, well, first of all, notice how his full name has matching gematria with human sacrifice and ritual human sacrifice. A phrase for sacrifice is 86, offing or getting rid of. The name Bruce is 86. So is William Bruce Jenner, 86. So is sex change, 86. And Rafer Johnson died at the age of 86 years old. He was also 106 days after his birthday. Bruce Jenner, 106. Born on a date with 106 numerology. Remember the Arches, inaugurated on 10/6. And here's another good one I did not mention. Gender's 2020 interview was exactly 172 days after the opening of WTC 1. This is also 5 months, 3 weeks. The word transgender is 53 and 172. All right, guys. You having fun with this decode yet? I know we're going over a lot of numbers. There's a lot of connections here. But without a doubt, the Statue of Liberty ritual speaks for itself. You have this androgynous statue looking over the World Trade Center destroyed in 2001. And then to me, once I discovered that eclipse code with the arches, that just explained everything about what's going on here. Because not only, I mentioned how if you measure from 9/11 to December 1st when Elliot Page came out, it's exactly 1,003 weeks. WTC is 1,003. Well, this date was also 13 days before this year's total solar eclipse. And then if you measure to the total solar eclipse after that, you get 1 year and 3 days. So this was a huge 13 going on here as well. They love that number 13. All right, how about this one? Elliot Page came out as trans exactly 7,022 days after September 11th. Now, those who follow this work, they know that 722, 227 is an important number. In Hebrew, total eclipse is 227. 22 divided by 7 gives you the first 3 digits of pi. St. Louis Gateway Arch equals 227? You know what? Think about how 2 times 27 is 54. These arches came out 54 years before the eclipses of 2021. But what a lot of people don't know is that the Twin Towers, you know, we had the collapse of the 2 Twin Towers early on in the day, and then we had a third collapse of Building 7. Well, Building 7 collapsed 7 hours and 22 minutes after the first building. So this is a big number that's coded into 9/11. But check this out. It's also 19 years and 82 days. 1982. Well, what was the biggest movie of the year 1982? The movie was E.T., the Extraterrestrial, which broke all box office records. And originally I thought this was a coincidence, and now I don't think it is. In the movie E.T., the main character, the alien, there's a scene where he dresses up as a woman. And then he calls for Elliot, the main character of the movie. Check out how Elliot's full name with these middle and last names has the same gematria as E.T. the Extraterrestrial, 271. He comes out as trans 2007 weeks after the film Trans is 27. I mean, as bizarre as this sounds, I really do think this is some intentional coding. I mean, this person wasn't even born when this film came out, though. That's what's so wild about this, but there you have it. You know, again, me, the guy who made the Gematria calculator, I have matching Gematria with Gematria, so I'm not sure what's all going on in this world. But this is some advanced stuff. And considering that, you know, we're already talking about how the film Mrs. Doubtfire is tied in, I don't really think it's a stretch to say that there's some coding with E.T. in here. It was almost too bizarre for me to want to share, but couldn't help it. All right, let's see. I just want to make sure I'm covering everything I have on this huge riddle. Oh, Robin Williams also died at the age of 63. I forgot to mention that. So I'm going to have to kind of tweak this post and add in the Robin Williams parts of it. All right. There was another blog post I did want to tap into. And, well, I guess there's a couple. We're talking about news stories from today being connected to movies from yesterday. And another example of this came up last week when we got a story about an Instagram influencer named Alexis Sharkey being found dead. So my first thought that popped into my head when I saw the name Sharkey is that, hey, maybe this is connected to Jaws. Now, I didn't follow through on it originally, but then I noticed this person was found nude. Now, in the movie Jaws, this film begins when Chrissy Watkins goes skinny dipping and is killed by a shark. So in the very first scene, someone is killed while they're nude. So I'm like, oh man, there's got to be a connection. And sure enough, there was. First of all, Sharkey was exactly 1,401 weeks old when she died. Instagram is 141. So is 33, the gematria of Sharkey. Notice how Instagram has the same gematria as Sharkey, 102 and 39. But with capital letters, notice how Jaws equals 102 as well. And again, Jaws begins with a woman skinny dipping. Alexis Sharkey was found nude. Notice how Amity Island matches Houston, Texas, the two scenes of the film and the news story. Instagram found it on a date with 46 numerology. Furthermore, Sharkey's death fell 5 months and 7 days after the anniversary of the release of the film. The word shark equals 57 and 78. her death was on a date with numerology of 78. The name Alexis Sharkey matches Jaws with capital letters. Jaws matches influencer in Gematria. There was also a tie-in to the blood sacrifice code here. So this is definitely what they're doing. They're using old Hollywood films and the numerology of them, waiting for a certain date that has interesting alignments with the film, and then they give us a news story that's connected. Another really interesting blog post I did this week, my last video was on the death of David Prowse, who played Darth Vader. And just a couple years ago, we had the death of the wrestler Vader. And this post here explains the connections numerically between Darth Vader and Leon White, who played Vader. His full name has the same gematria as Darth Vader. And of course, Darth Vader died in relation to the eclipse code. David Charles Prowse equals 202, just like total solar eclipse, and he died 2 weeks and 2 days before the 2020 total solar eclipse. Of course, Darth Vader commanded the 2 moons, the Death Stars. The wrestler Vader, he had a finisher called a moonsault. And his name equals 223 in reverse and Jewish, which is a moon number, the number of months in the sorrow cycle. Darth Vader was born within a day of a new moon. That was lunation 155. As you can see here, lunation 155, he was born on July 1st. Leon Allen White equals 155 in Gematria, born in the year 55. When Vader died, Darth Vader was 30,303 days old, and then Darth Vader died on the 333rd day of the year, which leaves 33 days on the calendar. Prowse equals 33. Death Star equals 33. When you write out 33, it sums to 895, which is the same as ritual human sacrifice. The 2 Vaders died a span of 895 days apart. And this is a really long post. I invite you guys to check out my blog, which is, of course, linked in the description below, as always. I had another post on here about the 2019 news story of Ghislaine Maxwell being spotted at an In-N-Out burger. And the reason I did this decode is because I was on Jason Goodman's show this past week. And he thought that this was such a bizarre news story. He's like, what's with this? Is there a riddle here? And I told him on air, I said, absolutely, of course there's a riddle. Now, I didn't decode it live during the show, but I told him I would do a post on it. And sure enough, no question, this story was 100% by the numbers. Now, Ghislaine Maxwell's full name equals 307 in the alphabetic order. That's the same as fast food in Jewish gematria, and she turned 3,007 weeks old the week of this story. Burger also equals 37. And another thing I told Jason is I said, this story is going to be related to the anniversary of In-N-Out Burger. And sure enough, it was 69 days before the anniversary of In-N-Out Burger. In-N-Out is 69. There's a big 666 riddle in here as well, because sex trafficking is 666, just like Pizzagate. So that's pretty cool. And what I'll do is I'll find that video. I can actually dig it up right now. And I'm going to link it down in the description so you can see my appearance on that show. And yeah, I had met Jason Goodman at Anarchadelphia last year. And Jason was on a panel there. And it was a panel that Zach was originally supposed to be on before he had backed out of the conference. And yeah, I met him there. We had dinner. And, you know, actually, let me finish putting the link in here first. Then I'm going to talk about this. Okay, Gematrinator on Crowdsource the Truth. that is now in the description. All right. So, last year I met Jason Goodman at Anarchadelphia, and I had watched a lot of his work on the Las Vegas shooting. And that's kind of how I found out about him and got to know him. So I asked him questions about the Vegas shooting and told him what I was about. And then the following day, I did my presentation on the Eclipse Crucifixion Code. And he said he was really impressed by the presentation. And at the conference, when I spoke, there were roughly somewhere between like 100 and 150 people in the room. And aside from Mark Passio, I don't think anyone got more people asking them questions afterwards than I did. Like after I got off stage, there were like groups and groups of people coming who wanted to talk to me, which is really cool, you know, because for someone who just does this in front of their computer most of the time, it's nice to get that real world affirmation. So while I was on the show, Zach popped in and wanted to be part of it, but he didn't ask nicely, of course, because for whatever reason, he's got this great disdain for me. So he butts in and says, Derek's dumb, he's bad, he doesn't know what he's talking about, which is not a good way to endear yourself to somebody. And, you know, Jason told me after the show off air, he said, look, I don't really know if Gematria matters. I don't know if it's relevant. He's like, honestly, I don't care. But I see that it's a topic that has a lot of passion. It's something that a lot of people are talking about. So he felt it was his responsibility to have me on the show to some extent. And originally I was going to be on there last year. For whatever reason, it didn't work out. We were both kind of busy. And, you know, it was like a year until I reached back out to him and I said, hey, you know, this coronavirus is the ultimate manifestation of this eclipse code, which I taught in Anarchadelphia. So originally I didn't even ask to be on the show. I just said, I just want to share what I have. And I think you'll want to have me on the show once I do. And it turns out he just had me on the show. We didn't even talk beforehand. So I wasn't totally prepared and ready for it. So there were a couple things I left out. But, you know, overall, I did my thing. Just explained how the coronavirus is this eclipse ritual. Because, again, the corona is what the name of the atmosphere of the sun is, which is only visible during a total solar eclipse. So they literally named this virus after the eclipse code. Yet some people are unwilling to accept this or admit it. I don't understand why. It's very strange to me. But, you know, Zach could have been on the show had he been nice about it. Also, he could have met Jason Goodman back at Anarchadelphia, a conference that he was invited to, one that he started talking shit about the presenters at. And the way Zach framed it is that he helped his reputation by not sharing the stage with these shills. That's what he said. Which is strange because, you know, what I did there is help share Gematria with a new crowd. And the fact that somebody like Jason, who doesn't care about Gematria and doesn't really understand it, isn't interested in teaching it, the fact that he was still willing to have me on and discuss it should be a win for everybody who cares about truth, right? I mean, isn't that the goal here, is to take this ancient occulted knowledge, bring it to the masses so that everyone has a better understanding of what's happening in this world? That's my take on it. That's how I see this, but unfortunately, that isn't how everybody in the Gematria community, so to speak, sees it. So it's unfortunate. You know, Zach's a great teacher. He's a great speaker. And certainly, you know, there could be a lot of good from having him on other shows, but you're not going to be able to get appearances on other shows if you always talk people down, if you're always coming into conversations as if you're the one who's right and everybody else is worthless. And that's his approach to it. And that's too bad because, you know, when I talk about this with people, I tend to try to keep like an oh shucks attitude, right? Like, hey, I teach this thing. It's really interesting. It's got a big following. You should check it out. And through those types of conversations, you realize, you know, it's pretty easy to get through to people. And even people who don't care about Gematria are willing to have you on if you're nice. But unfortunately, that's not how everybody sees things. So that's about all I have to say for it. You know, I've already made a big, long video addressing this beef for whatever reason that is between Zach and whatever problem he has with my work. Honestly, I just don't care anymore. I mean, I wish it was all fun and games, but, you know, And I mean, people in the chat, you guys, you understand what's going on here. Like, if you go back to my video I made on Zach and look at the comments, it's rare for a comment on my channel to get more than 10 likes. But the comments that talk about Zach on that channel or on that video have 70 likes. And it's because, the energy that Zach brings to this research is not positive. It's detrimental to an extent. And, he shouldn't be the only person who's teaching it out there. And again, I don't know what changed with him at some point, but at some point this primarily became about money for him. And it's not for me. And I don't want it to be about money for me. I have a job that I like. Or I don't like it, but I tolerate it. And I like doing good in the world. I could not stand running numbers all day, every day. That's not in my personality. For me to go out into the world and affect change and do things with my job, let me give you an example. So a lot of you know I work for GE Healthcare. I run a reverse logistics supply chain for medical parts. And that supply chain is a very valuable supply chain. I created my own database. I did not go to school. I didn't go to college, but I still got hired into GE based on my skill. Which is why I preach to everybody, find something you're good at and go out into the world and show people what you're good at, and good things will happen. So just as an example of something that's in the real world that I did, right? Back in 2012 or 2013, there was a big company-wide email that went out to all GE employees in healthcare. What happened is one of our machines broke with a patient who was getting scanned. I think it was an elderly patient, and that patient died from the injuries sustained in this accident. Well, what they found out is that there was a screw that was deteriorated and was in really bad shape, and that led to the failure of the system. And this was really bad for the company. If someone's trying to get medical care and they die when doing it, that's no good. So at the time, I had a former coworker from the parts team who was overseeing preventative maintenance. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, I heard about what's going on. I'd like to help. I'd like to use my skills in programming to give you guys a better way to do these preventative maintenance calls. And because that was what was happening, is that we were so far behind on PMs that the machine was falling out of repair. So based on this program that I helped put together with a couple of other programmers, we created a new system, and since then there have been no accidents. So, I look at it and I think, hey, maybe I saved a life by those activities, okay? So the point, and I don't know, maybe I didn't, whatever, that's exaggerating, but the point is, I don't mind working, okay? So this is not about money to me. This isn't about me. It's about Gematria and learning more about Gematria and what it really is. Because to me, Gematria, first and foremost, primarily above everything else, is the language of God, okay? It's the language of God, and we should treat it as such. The reason these evil people enjoy it so much is because they know this. They are attempting to take the language of God, twist it and pervert it, and simulate that language in their agenda, in their rebellion. That's what's going on, and that's why Gematria is so important. It's because it's the language of God. And when people understand that and see that it can apply to their own lives too, that's true mental progress. That is enlightenment. That is advancement. And that's what I'm trying to help bring out. So, the fact that he wants to attack these live streams as soon as I show up on them, to me, it's hard not to laugh a little bit. I just feel bad for him. And I hope that he finds more happiness in what he's doing at some point, because he has made a terrific change. I might not be doing this if he wasn't doing that work, so I just wish all the best for him. That's all I got to say. But ultimately, as soon as I stopped parroting the exact same stuff that Zach was saying, he turned on me, and he'll turn on everyone else too. And in fact, I heard that Rambo was a little... I shouldn't bring Rambo into this. He's a great guy. He does excellent work. I heard Zach recently brought him on the payroll, which is cool, because Rambo might be the best decoder of all of us. He really might be. He's awesome. But, why did Zach say Rambo was rambling about something the other day? Rambo has the most difficult job in the Gematria community. To go on Zach's show for a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour straight, and talk about a new, interesting, symbolic decode every week. I'm not doing that. No one's doing that. That's incredibly difficult. So it should only be expected that he might have a hiccup one of these weeks. So I just want to throw it out there that he's super valuable and that. Ooh, great question in the chat. So I've been kind of paying attention here. How could a loving God allow so much evil in the world? And this is the point of contention with me. Some of my closest friends just don't understand this. And I don't understand it either. But I like to try to shed a little bit more light on it. So for us, we are all spiritual beings having a human experience, so to speak. And we're here to gain light, to understand more about love, about those around us, and to ascend in consciousness, which is understanding that you, I, all the people around us, we all come from the same source. We are all essentially one. So for us to better understand that requires that we obtain more love, that we learn more about how to share and show love. So that's a big part of it. And without evil in the world, there's no love, because if everything's love, then we don't have a definition of love. There's no black and white. Evil allows for the distinction of good and bad. And from there, we can make more informed decisions about how we spend our time, how we treat people, things like that. So, my thing with God is that I fear God first and foremost. I love God, but I think I fear him more. And I think that's probably the right approach. Because everyone thinks, oh, God is just lovey-dovey, polka dots and lollipops, but that's not what it is, okay? He loves you, but he's going to make it difficult for you to come around to that fact, right? And I talk about so often what got me into Gematria in the first place, which was the death of a family member's father. A sister-in-law who I was living with at the time lost her father the same day I asked for a sign on what Gematria was. And his death was a symbolic numeric riddle. Now, that was tough for me. That was tough for the family. But if that didn't happen, the Gematrinator wouldn't exist. I wouldn't be making these videos. We wouldn't be coming together and learning more like this. That's kind of just a fact. So that was a moment where I'm thinking, wow, God loves me, but he made things suck for me for a little bit. That was hard to go through. And I could say, oh, why God? Why did you do it? But that would also be assuming that I know as much as God. And that's ridiculous. God is all-knowing. I'm nowhere near anywhere near that. So for me at the time, yeah, it was tough and hard for people involved, but it also helped bring something new to the world. And now here we are 4 years later, and Gematria is no longer this bizarre, obscure thing stuck in the corner of the internet. It's now something that people are talking about freely, loosely, and helping use to wake people up. So even though Zach says things like, I'm the worst decoder, understand that's just a completely subjective stance, because the emails and comments I get from people say quite the opposite. In fact, they say I'm next level decoding. And I kind of agree. I think some of the things I'm looking at are next level. And understand, this is not all just me. A lot of the work I do, a lot of the posts I make is a corroboration of efforts from people like Rambo, Bobby, people who come in the Discord and share things. This isn't just me, myself. And that's another reason I don't ask for money, really, unless my website's coming up for renewal, because it's not just my work. This is the culmination of a community coming together, helping humanity reach higher levels of consciousness, which is a beautiful thing and should be celebrated. What do I think might happen in the next 10 years? Well, the next 10 years is definitely going to shape at least the next 100 years in this country. And it's going to depend on how much we do, how much action we take, we as the people. We're going to need to stand up for ourselves very soon, and in some places that's already happening. If you live in New York or California and you haven't yet protested these draconian lockdown orders, at this point, what the hell are you even doing? This is your time to stand up. And if you don't, if you just sit on your ass, obey their orders, and make another crack in your couch from your ass, then you deserve what you get. And, that's kind of part of what this all is that if humanity doesn't do anything in the next few years here and start to change the course of what's happening, we will get what we deserve, which is complete tyranny. So what do I think happened? I think it's going to depend on what we do. And again, you're seeing the population control agenda. It has more to do with keeping people from procreating than it does from killing people, but it's going to be both. And one of the ways they're going to kill people is through starvation. You're already seeing this in 2020, destruction of the food chain. If you don't have a supply of food, that's another mistake you're making. Whether it just be for a certain amount of time, I don't know. But so we're seeing that all play out. And yeah, a lot can change. The good news is that by the time 2030 rolls around, we can be totally free. That can happen. That's a reality. That's a truth that we should all be excited about. Because we get an opportunity that our parents didn't get, a lot of our grandparents didn't even get, which is to fight for our freedom. I started off this video talking about how the elimination of gender division is to remove passion from people's lives. Because the thing that makes me the most passionate is a beautiful woman who shares my ideals, right? And similarly, a masculine man sharing ideals of a woman. They find that the most sexy. And that's what this is all about. Taking these things that people can be passionate about, lowering their vibrations. And that's another thing that's happening in other parts of the Gematria community is that your vibrations are being lowered. The same thing that the mainstream media is doing, dividing. Why is Hubbard always going to war with other truthers? Because he wants to lower your vibrations. And you see it in the comments on his videos too. Yeah, Zach, show him. Show those real fake truthers. It's a bunch of angry people who are just pissed off at the world and don't even know how to channel their anger. They're just overflowing with so much hate and anger that they'll attack the people who have literally helped them the most. Think about it. My calculator has given the most help to Zach from anybody. My book was on my website for 3 years. I get 20,000 hits a day on my website. His book was on there for 3 years. Never saw a dime or anything. It's just crazy what's going on. Simple Truth TV, you still have the better beard. But I am very, very honored that you even made a comparison because yours is so much better. But I'm working towards it. I'm only 2 months into this beard. December is still another few weeks. We started in November. We're taking it to December. We're going to go through Bearduary, then February. I don't know what to say after that, but. Okay, Itachi says, Derek, how do you do a presentation and mention only 256 examples? So I assume this was maybe in something he was upset about on my appearance on that. Really, that's the thing you guys are focused on the most. So I guess what he's saying is that coronavirus, right? We know coronavirus is 56. Funny how toilet paper is 56. Mind control 56. But see, this is a difference in philosophies. And I'm glad this question was asked in the chat because to me, this is different, right? When I see several things that line up to a double-digit number, it's not that exciting to me, okay? You can't turn at that many heads when you share a double-digit thing that... Is it relevant? Absolutely. Is there coding in it? Yes, it's intentional. But I'm looking at the one thing that's going to take someone over the edge. And like I explained earlier, I'm going off of the riddle. What is the riddle? And the coronavirus is an eclipse riddle. So if you can explain the numerology of the riddle first, and then explain how this ritual ties in perfectly to that, that makes the most sense to me. And personally, when I've showed this to people, they've been blown away by what I've shared. And again, I was not as prepared as I could have been for that presentation, but 56 is literally almost nothing in this ritual for me. It just doesn't mean that much. So the 56 is nice, but what about, the corona? 2020, total solar eclipse 202. March 11th, coronavirus pandemic. We're all right there in the Gematria. So, I mean, to call that pathetic with all the other things I've shared and discovered, it just goes to show you how much brainwashing you've undergone by Hubbard. Because that's what he's really good at, is getting people on his side through bully-like behavior. All right. So, got a little sidetracked there. Just browsing through the chat, trying to find some more stuff here. I know I missed a lot early on in the video. Thanks for the compliments about how I should be having more viewers. Of course, this work that I'm sharing, when I originally made the calculator, I didn't even want to be a decoder. I wanted everyone who was doing decoding to have an easier way to decode. What happened is I started doing decodes on my own, and I realized there's a whole lot more interesting things out there that people are not sharing. And that's why I started this. And, another thing I wanted to say is that, we got a couple of people in the chat. There's one person in this chat, and I had one person in the Discord who came over and started talking smack. And think about all the smack that Zach has talked about me and my work over the last few months and couple years probably. I've only had one person come over and talk shit to me on my Discord. So out of 50,000 people or whatever that he's talking to, only one of them felt strongly enough about what he was saying about me to come over and talk shit. That just goes to show you that nobody really cares what he's saying about me. So it just doesn't bother me. Zach's Gematria is Alex Jones. That's funny. I don't know. I mean, yeah. I as far as whether or not he's controlled, I don't think so. That would be why. I would still be very, very surprised if I found out that Zach was, maybe not very, very surprised, but I'd be pretty surprised if someone told me he was control opposition, or if I found out that. That would really surprise me. It would. I don't think that's the case. He'll tell people that I'm a shill, which doesn't make any sense. Again, the guy who's helped him more than anyone, who's just sharing what he is. But whatever, that's not what this video is about. I wanted to keep that just at the back half. I didn't want to turn it into a big thing because other people want it to be a big thing. I don't. I just want to share numerology and talk about that. And I'm going to continue doing that as long as I keep learning things. And as this video has demonstrated, I'm still learning things. There's so much more to unpack. We'll probably be doing it for years to come. Oh, and yeah, the sports betting angle. I mean, I still get comments from people asking about sports, and I always tell them, don't waste your time. Can you win with in sport betting with Gematria? Sure, but here's the thing. I want you to look at it this way. Let's say you have 100 people betting on sports, right? And they're all using Gematria. A lot of those people are going to be coming to different conclusions about the winners, okay? People think different things are significant. Out of those 100 people, 10 of them are probably going to do really well. And those 10 people are all going to say Gematria is why I won. But then there's also going to be 90 people who did okay or did poorly, and they're either going to blame Gematria or say it doesn't matter. That's what we're looking at these days. And yes, there are sports games that are rigged by the numbers. Yes, that's 100% true. And sometimes you may be able to tell ahead of time. That's true. I believe that. But I want everybody to think very carefully about what happened in 2016, which to me is ultimate proof that Vegas monitors sports bets and then changes results of games, okay? So when we look at sports predictions, Zach's ultimate prediction was Super Bowl 50. He called Panthers-Broncos back in like October. He even said there would be a Black Panther tribute at halftime. He was right. And then we saw Cam Newton jump away from the football at the end of the game, which proved that the game was rigged. So that was awesome. That was amazing. And that got a lot of people into numerology, and that was great. Right after he made that pick and that came true, within a couple of weeks, he told everybody that the next Super Bowl was going to be Colts and Vikings and that the Colts would be winning, which is a pretty remarkable thing to claim in the immediate aftermath, right? So what happened? Everybody put their money in on the Colts. I even put like $50 in on the Colts to win the Super Bowl. And that's where all the money was going in Vegas. When I was in Vegas in 2016 and I bet on the Colts, the guy at the booth laughed because he's been getting so many bets on the Colts, right? So then what happens? Fast forward to December 24th, 2016. The Colts and Vikings in week 16 of the NFL both lose, thus both eliminated from the playoffs in the same day. On that same day, both teams scored 25 points, which is pretty rare in American football. That same day, Hubbard's house got hit by a car. Okay? And as far as both teams scoring 25 points, the Super Bowl ended up being held on 2-5. The Patriots came back from 25 points down. The guy who won the game turned 25 years old a couple weeks before the game. It was on a pitch play. Pitch is 25. It was the 97th season, which is the 25th prime number. Bill Belichick is 25 or 97. It was the 25th AFC Super Bowl, the 25th Patriots playoff win or Brady playoff win. They even moved the touchback to the 25-yard line. So think about that. Here you have Zach, who essentially broke the system with his prediction, right? And then he makes these predictions, which, and then those two teams get eliminated the same day his house is hit by a car. So again, I'm not saying that Zach was in on it. I'm saying that Vegas saw what was happening. They realized Zach figured out their code, and then they gave him grief and eliminated his teams on the same day. That's because the forces in Vegas, the forces who are rigging professional sports, will not enrich the public because they learned their code. That's not how this works. And now that the code has been discovered, everything is scattered. Everything's out there. So, sports betting, again, this is another thing that brings you into lower vibrations, because instead of you taking control of your own world, making your own decisions, going about your own destiny, you're looking at guys playing a kid's game on television and putting your emotional stock into it. Not just your emotions, but the wealth and value that you've worked hard for. You're putting into their efforts. And they don't care about you. They don't know who you are. They're making way, way more money for losing than you would be for winning. So why are you putting your money in that? It's crazy to me. But that's what's happening. That's the truth about sports. And Zach doesn't want you to know that. He just wants you to know that he made a few really good predictions. Those came true. And as long as you're roped in based on that knowledge, then he's got you, right? He's not betting on sports. He's getting money from people on Patreon who are taking his information and betting. So, I apologize to those of you who still want to defend him and call that, but yeah, I mean, he was High Impact TV. Zach was bashing them too. He's in a battle with everybody. Just that's what he's doing. So, all right, I got nothing more to say on that front. I spoke my mind. I spoke it before. I spoke it again. And enough's enough. Interesting comment here. Someone was talking about how back in March they were wearing a mask because even though they know about numerology and what the dark occult agenda is, that they were concerned that they had actually released a bioweapon. Excuse me. That's what my mom thinks too, actually, right now, which is why she's still so serious about the mask stuff. It's like, oh, this is a bioweapon. It's here to clean up old people. Yeah, that was a theory of mine too at the beginning, that could be happening. But, as we've definitely found out now, this virus, this disease is just about as deadly as the flu. And remember, if you're looking to have a debate about how severe COVID-19 is, The real proof lies in the excess death numbers. Everybody go to the CDC website and look at the total number of deaths in 2020. And what you'll find is that, and remember, you can only use the data up through like 2 months ago because data from the last 2 months is still pouring in. What you'll find is that the number of deaths in America, which is usually about 7,800 per day, is up this year very slightly to just under 8,000 per day. Now, so we have 200 more deaths, or about 250 more deaths per day on average. Some of that is population growth, right? About 0.5% per year or more. Some of that, a small amount, is murders. Murder rates are up like 60% in the United States. A lot are suicides. So how deadly is the disease really? Because when you look at the flu deaths, remember in 2018, we had almost 70,000 people die of the flu. But this year in 2020, flu deaths are in the single digits per week. It's basically been completely eradicated. Pneumonia deaths are incredibly low. But so what you're seeing is all these flu, pneumonia deaths moved, recategorized to COVID-19. And the proof is right there on the CDC site. There's no question about it that they're grossly exaggerating this. Why would they tell us 1,000 or 1,500 people are dying per day when the excess death toll is only 200 a day higher? They're obviously hiding something. And like I've been saying all along, 7,800 people die per day in this country. And the death toll from COVID will never get to that. Now they're saying like up to 2,500 people per day, but it's still not approaching what we normally have. Again, it's all recategorization. Do I believe the Pope runs the world? Well, it's more of an establishment thing, right? You have the Jesuit order, and there's a lot of truth in the idea that the Jesuit order is the ultimate establishment guiding this agenda. Yes. I mean, they control some of the biggest universities in the nation. They're entrenched in the Ivy League schools. No doubt about it. The Pope himself is more of a figurehead or a puppet. He's not making any decisions or shots. That's all coming from the bankers who are above him. Those that sit at the table with Satan. It's Satan's directives coming down. And when I say Satan, yeah, I do think it's some sort of spirit perhaps that's being channeled by these people, and they're allowing Satan to act through them. A lot of us are allowing God to act through them. I like to think that's what I'm doing. I got a lot of work to do. We all probably do. But mandatory vaccination is really where the fight will probably start, if they try it. And they want to try it. Remember in Denmark, they tried introducing a bill that says that the police can force you to get vaccinated. And they had to repeal that bill because people protested. So that showed the New World Order that if they try that here, we will protest too. Because we have guns just like Denmark. We actually have a lot more guns than Denmark. So we're not going to put up with that shit. But, you know, I kind of hope that they announce that mandatory vaccination is coming, because people are ready to fight now, especially with all the election shenanigans. People want it to change. My concern is that they wait another 10 years. They dumb us down even more. They have another generation that's completely stupid, raised on electronics, raised not to think, and then they try it. That's actually scarier to me. A recent video, I said, I think if they waited 10 years for coronavirus, all of this would have gone a lot more smoothly. They could have done 10 more years of false flag shootings, taking our guns first, but they didn't, because they had to do it in 2020. They had to do it at the halfway point of the eclipses because it's called the coronavirus. They are on a clock. They're on a schedule. All right, guys, I've been running for about 90 minutes here. I'm getting a little hungry. You know, speaking truth drains you a little bit. It burns some calories. It's a fun thing to do. So I'm going to get some food in my belly. Thanks to the 120 guys, 120 of you who jumped in live on the stream. It was a lot of fun chatting with you here at the end. Sorry I didn't get into the chat earlier, but, you know, it's always good to kind of tap into what's going on currently in the truth community and just remind everybody that The forces of evil are coming at you through all directions, even disguised as those who are giving us solid, good information. And even if the intent is not to divide, the energies driving certainly are. So, you know, when you feel like someone's trying to make you feel hatred for somebody and you're not sure, or they're trying to pull you in a different direction, start questioning them. Start wondering what you're really doing, because, you know, knowledge is great, and we should all be thankful that people are sharing knowledge, but we always need to continue to vet that knowledge and what it means. And that's the message I want to get across. So thanks to everybody. I love each and every one of you. Peace, love, God bless. Stay strong out there. Keep fighting the good fight. Stand against the New World Order. Remember, disobedience to a tyrannical government is obedience to God, and that's what matters most. Thanks again, guys. We'll see you next time. Adios.